Hi, I'm Sherry Trentini, and if you're here today hanging out with me, I want to thank you for doing so. Today is Suicide Prevention Day, and every year I believe it's a global date that we have an opportunity to talk about how to prevent suicide. So first off, I am not a MD, I'm not a PhD, I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist, social worker, counselor, any of those things. I come here today as somebody who has experienced the loss and grief from someone who my husband died of suicide. And I come from a place of wanting to just share what I've learned over the number of years because so much has changed since that day. And so again, welcome. Thank you for being here. So what I do is I work with people to recover from grief, and that can be from any loss. And one of the things that was important to me when I first did the sort of research about getting more information was to find out how that particular institute dealt with suicide and what their opinion was, because that, of course, is something that I came to the table with when I first started doing the research a couple of years ago, because there's such a stigmatism around suicide. There's, so many different thoughts and ideas about what we believe to be true. And so one of the things that they had shared with me that made quite a difference was that they look at any death or any loss as not quantifiable, in that everybody who experiences grief from whatever their loss is unique to them, and that there's no quantifying. Because I had gone on for a number of years thinking that my husband's death was, of course, outside of the box because of the whole suicide thing. And that's where that judgment and ideas, preconceived ideas and notions about suicide has been. In 2013, I came across a blog that I would like to share with you from attemptsurvivors.com. And the big thing that I learned was the change and switch of language, of how we can start to perpetuate change and broaden how we think and feel about people who are experiencing suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, and so on and so forth. So I want to share that with you today too. The one thing that I do know in my personal experience outside of the loss of my husband was that people who are having suicidal thoughts or ideation and on that thought process don't often just come straight out and say to you, I want to kill myself. Sometimes they do, but not always. And I had a personal experience a number of years ago where a very important person to me was sharing about some of the things that she was thinking about and some of the things that were going on with her after having had an incredible life event. And each conversation that we had, she would share more and more of some of the things that she was thinking about and how these things were sort of making a lot more sense to her, and they felt like a direction that felt like a good solution. And what happened on one of the particular phone calls is that we were thousands of miles and thousands of kilometers away from each other. So it's not like I could have jumped in the car and went straight over to be of support and be helpful. But what I was able to do was I really heard what she was saying. I really listened to what she was saying, and then reached out to somebody to help her, which was her family. And I'm so grateful for being able to make that connection, and so that she was able to get the help and support that she needed to feel different and to feel better and to feel heard. And that's one of the quotes that I find to be most significant. And it's a variation of a Stephen Covey quote that says, the biggest communication problem we have is that we don't listen to understand, but we listen to reply. I didn't have a solution for her. Of course, the trains of thought that she was going on, I did not want her to be getting on board. I wanted to get her off of that train. But the difference in that particular situation is that I stopped myself from feeling that I needed to have the solution, or that I could have talked her out of it, or I could have told her to suck it up and, come on, don't be talking like that, because that's how she was thinking and feeling. And so those are some of the things that when it comes to suicide prevention, if somebody is sharing something intimate of how they are feeling, it is not necessarily that they are waiting for us to have the magic answer and to share the most sage and wise thing in order for them to, oh, you're right, I'm going to change that thought and it's all going to go away. The difference is that we need to be more compassionate to what somebody is sharing with us. Then again, not everybody who has suicidal ideation and are having these thoughts are, expressing what is going on for them. And, people can keep all of that inside of them. And I'd shared a quote on my Facebook page yesterday that said, people can be quiet about their pain, that you forget that they are hurting. And that's only a portion of the quote, but I think it's very, very prevalent that we have that opportunity to, we don't want to talk about heavy stuff like that. We don't want to, because we don't have the solutions, we don't have the answers. So when people, put on the facade or put on the brave face or whatever you want to call it and stop talking about it, we think, oh, everything's okay. It's okay. We don't need to do much. But that's maybe when we need to be listening even more, listening to what they're not saying and being there to support. Again, they're not turning to us in order to have the magic answer, but they certainly could use the compassion and empathy in order to help them get the support that they need. I came across a website called speakingofsuicide.com, and it says, and the one thing I wanted to share today was the 10 things not to say to a person. The days preceding my husband's death, things were not awesome at our house. And in one conversation, a very heated conversation on the telephone, he had made a passing comment about harming himself. And I'm very forthcoming about this to my kids know I've talked about this with other people, but because it was the first and only time I'd ever heard anything like that, because we were in a stressful time and our communication wasn't exactly ideal. How did I receive that? What filter was I using in order to hear that? I thought, he's not going to do anything like that. Like, that's just stupid. Like, why are you talking about that? And, why would you even say that? But, it's in the heat of the moment that when people are saying things that, of course, sound like bizarre to us, like, why would they be thinking that? Why would they be saying that? That's when, our beliefs and our ideas about who that person is, we're maybe making assumptions, and maybe that's the time where we need to step back and listen to what we are hearing, and see, sort of change the texture. Could I have done something more, better, or different in that situation? Absolutely. But I also came with this preconceived ideas that what he was saying was just an attempt to, do something to distract me from what we were going through. This article is pretty clear about how, it's not, these words don't come out specifically often, but it's that receiving end, it's that empathy, it's the understanding or not understanding, but again, not wanting to reply. So they've got 10 things not to say. The first one is, how could you think of suicide? Your life's not that bad. It is my understanding, with all the reading that I've done over the years, it's not about, it's not as easy as to look at all the abundance that we have in the world and all the good things that they have. The overriding thought is that, that this is more of a solution. And again, not a practical solution, but at the same time that it's not that they don't appreciate and see all the things that they have, it's that they are inside on that hamster wheel of other thoughts that sort of take them out of that place of appreciation. So they're saying here that when we say to somebody, well, things can't be that bad, that we are diminishing how they are feeling inside. Another thing that they share on this post is, don't you know that I would be devastated if you killed yourself? How could you think of hurting me like that? Oof. Well, absolutely. That comes from an honest place for the person speaking that. But that person who is being honest about feeling this way and having these thoughts already feels bad because they can't, this is overwhelming them. And now we add another layer of guilt or shame or other things. The whole suicide is selfish. I heard that so much after he died. And that is a really, really tough thing because it's selfish in one way that you look at it, but how can we make that judgment? How can we, again, place that shame and blame on the person who is overwhelmed with the depressive thoughts or these feelings? Oh, suicide is cowardly. Yeah. I heard that. And you know what? I also thought that from, that's sort of the collective consciousness, that it's selfish and it's cowardly. I totally disagree with that whole idea. But again, that's imposing something on a person who is sharing very intimately that this is what's going on for them. And now we're telling them they're a coward when they are being so incredibly brave by being open with you right now, or in sharing that this is what's happening for them. So I don't see where we've attached cowardice to that, especially for somebody who is coming and, being open and wanting to be heard. Another one that they have on the list here is, you don't mean that. You don't really want to die. Well, I'll continue, it says, often that's set out of anxiety or fear by the listener. And this message is invalidating and again, dismissive. We're presuming that the person, does mean that they want to die, but at the same time, it's an opportunity for how can we get you the help that you need? And we are again sort of imposing on them our fear and our anxiety about listening to someone having this level of pain. You have so much to live for. Yeah. And that kind of statement can be, a reminder of all the things that they do have. But the overriding thing right now is that is not on top of mind. There are other things that are, taking away from their ability to see all the love and abundance and support that they have surrounding them. Things could be worse. Oof. Well, that doesn't inspire a lot of joy and hope, as they say on this post, and I agree. That's a tough thing that we want to compare. Look at this person, look at that person, and things are so much worse for them. But right now in their world, this is the worst thing that could be possibly happening. This is the thing that they are thinking about that is overwhelmed and so much going on. So to start diminishing what they are feeling, because that's their experience, it's like saying, look at all the starving children, that don't have a plate full of food. Well, yeah, there are starving children and you have a plate full of food, but right now, this is where we need to be. We need to be more focused on what's happening in the present, maybe not what other people are experiencing. And so we need to, again, sort of stop ourselves from wanting to lessen what they are feeling or diminish what they are feeling. Again, another along that same lines, that other people have problems worse than you and they don't want to die. Well, that's an assumption for sure. And again, a way to take them out of honestly and authentically sharing with you where they are at. So that's certainly a conversation killer and something that would turn them away from you, from them continuing to be open with you. And suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Absolutely, that it is permanent. There's no doubt about that. And when there are things happening in somebody's life that they feel that this is, the biggest and most obtrusive thing, that it doesn't feel like it's temporary, because maybe they've been feeling like this for a long time. Maybe it's something that started small and it's grown and grown and grown and grown, and they don't have that ability to be reflective and step back to see when it was small and how it's possible to sort of turn things around and, find a solution. So that is certainly another way to be dismissive when somebody is being honest with you. The last one, you will go to hell if you die by suicide. Absolutely, there are religions that have a strong belief of what happens when someone dies by suicide, and that, again, that's just adding guilt and shame and all the other good stuff on them. So this is a great article. I'll throw a link to the post in the comments here. But one of the biggest things that I would say from sharing this information with you and my own experience is, again, listening to understand. We don't have to understand fully what it is that they're experiencing, and we don't have to have the answers, but we certainly can be a part of a potential solution by finding a suicide hotline number, getting resources locally. And because of the prevalence of suicide, there are so many resources. There are so many free, call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, where they can at least start the process of getting someone who can listen to them and help them to feel heard, because that is the biggest thing. And I've said that a number of times, that the greatest gift that we can give someone is listening and feeling heard, and not having that feeling of being dismissed. Like I said, in 2013, I came across this blog that I want to share with you. But when I first started reading it, in what he's making in these statements, I could raise my hand all day long, because I had those same beliefs and those same thought processes about suicide, the cowardly, the selfishness, all of that stuff, because that's our collective consciousness. That information has been passed on from generation to generation. And one of the things that I would also say is that even my kids, who are teenagers, 16 and 18, they are growing up in a world that has a much broader understanding and the norm of understanding about mental illness, about anxiety, about depression, about all of the many other moving parts when it comes to mental illness, that they have a much more compassion, because they have learned so much more, that they know so much more. And when I was their age, I grew up in the whole suck it up, princess, like, get back up, stop thinking that way, that's stupid, all of those things. And so what a wonderful gift that as we are learning more, we can learn from our children and the younger generation to be a lot more accepting and understanding that a mental illness does not necessarily mean a weakness. It is not a weakness. It is an illness. And that is one of the biggest sort of mind shifters, because we have come from such a long time of thinking that people were less than if they were depressive, or if they were anxious, or things like that. So what a gift that the generation that they're coming up and having so much more information, so much more empathy with what people are experiencing. I've posted this on my blog a couple times, because I've shared this with multiple people, because of what an amazing mindset shift I received after reading this. And I had even reached out to the author of this blog, because I was sort of so stuck in that victim mode. And even when my girls were especially in the first few months after their dad died, they would ask the question, why would he do that? And my responses, though, came from a genuine place, and I was trying to be as as genuine and authentic and non-harmful as possible when speaking to them, I know that I perpetuated some of those same ideas and those limiting ideas about mental illness. And in this article, I'll just get right to it and then I'll interject as I go. Joel Coburn was the author of this, and it's from attemptsurvivors.com. And he starts off by saying, talking about suicide is counterproductive. At first blush, that statement is completely misguided, but bear with me. Before a suicidal event, the focus seems to be on reducing stigma or preventing deaths. After a suicidal event, however, come the questions. Why did he or she do it? What was so terrible? Did they really think this was the best solution? I'm totally guilty of that. Did I miss something? And so on. The common thread in these questions appear to be the concept of choice. There's the idea that the person who takes their own life or tries to do so did it purposefully and voluntarily. And this is a sad and destructive point of view. I can't be certain, but I'm pretty sure that after I read that particular statement, I may have taken a sort of setback from the computer, because I know that I had perpetuated the thought that when my girls, when they were younger, were asking, why did Daddy do this? And my response was always, I don't know why he would choose not to be here, but I'm so grateful that I'm here with you. And that is a really a tough thing, because I was then perpetuating that whole concept and idea that what he did was a choice. It's like he decided to have a ham sandwich for lunch, and so he got the bread and the butter and the ham and put it all together. And so, we have that idea, that mindset that this is, that this was a choice. I'll continue here. It says, let's start with the current thinking about suicide. Then let's see how we can change change it. Stigma and prejudice is probably the biggest deterrent facing people who are searching for help. And even though that our world has broadened about the understanding and appreciation and compassion around mental illness, I would still say that there's a level, there's still that sort of filter in which it is not okay for them to find help. It's not okay to talk about it. It's not okay to be honest about and emotionally truthful about what it is that they're feeling. The language around suicide has already blamed them and made their thoughts and feelings their fault, their choice, but nothing could be further from the truth. In general, we can say people look down on and judge those who have had suicidal experience. Typical comments refer to weakness, selfishness, and cowardice. And then, of course, the inevitable question, how could you do this to me? Let's look at the vocabulary associated with suicide. People kill themselves, try to kill themselves, commit suicide, attempt, fail at suicide, and are successful at suicide. All are very troublesome. Then you have what might be the most confusing term. It is often suggested to patients as they start their recovery that if they look on the internet under suicide survivors, they will find support groups and resources. But these are grief groups for parents, siblings, and other family and friends. Here's what's troublesome about the term suicide survivor. With cancer, heart disease, liver failure, and so on, the survivor is the person who is directly affected by the health problem, who lives with it and sometimes dies from it. By taking on the role of suicide survivor, the bereaved accept the role of victim as well, since they are inexorably connected. You cannot be a survivor without being a victim. And to be a victim, there must be a perpetrator. Would that perpetrator then be the very person for whom they grieve? As I said, a troublesome term. However, we all know that the true culprit of a death by suicide has yet to be revealed, but we have a pretty good idea. Research has stated that more than 90% of the people who died by their own hand do so while suffering from mental illness. Now, again, I'm reading directly from a blog that was written in 2013. The number of years have passed. Perhaps the statements of percentages and statistics might be different. This begs the question, is death really their choice? If they had died from an untreated cancer instead, would we blame them, or would we have compassion for their terminal illness? And if mental illness is the cause, how can responsibility be assigned to its victim instead? Why do we say that they made a choice? If it is recognized that someone died while overcome by an illness, mental or otherwise, it becomes impossible to blame them for the event. The cause of death is the illness, not the problem. So a death by suicide is not a choice, it is a result. So again, when I read this in 2013, that really just shattered a whole bunch of thoughts that I had, a whole bunch of beliefs that I had about how, he made this choice. Why would he make this choice? How could he do this to his kids? How could he do this to me, his family, his friends, all of these people? Because that's what I knew to be true. And this statement in this blog post changed all of that. I'll continue. And in that case, doesn't it make more sense to use language that takes responsibility, the blame from the victim, and puts it where it belongs, with the disease? When the term suicide is one day replaced with a less blaming term, such as fatal depressive episode, we have started to recognize the true nature of the event. It demonstrates that what has happened is not an assertive act, but the product of a disease. We begin to acknowledge the absence of intent, and we recognize the overwhelming darkness and hopelessness that defines such an illness at an advanced stage. When we replace killed themselves or committed suicide with fatal depressive episode, we start to see the horror of the mental illness that took our son, our daughter, our husband, our brother, sister. And we can reduce the stigma. We can open a real dialogue. We can stop blaming our loved ones and ourselves and get to the task at hand, understanding, healing, and prevention. So, to this day, even though I have read this repeatedly and I have shared it repeatedly, I still fall back into that same language. I still fall back into that mindset, and I neglect to use that term of fatal depressive episode, because doesn't that make a big difference? Doesn't that change what our perceptions and what our beliefs and what we have known to be true as to how people are perceived when they've attempted or successful or otherwise? It did for me. It did for me. So, does that mean that I am the world-class listener? I've had one experience that I shared at the top of this, but does that mean that because I have this personal experience and it's unique to me, and that this is, dinner conversation? Well, in some cases, it certainly is. About a year and a half after after he died, we had moved abroad. And at my eldest daughter's school, they were having a school dance. And just before the school dance, one of her classmates had successfully committed suicide, had a fatal depressive episode. And so the dance was canceled. And so when she shared that with me, what did I perceive that to be? I felt that was another opening to talk about suicide, talk about some of the things that we had learned in that time so far, talked about, if you were feeling this way, you know that you can talk to me, keeping those lines of communication open, because it is around us all the time. We may not have a direct connection with that classmate or schoolmate rather, but there's that ripple effect, because then it brings up all the other things that you've been feeling or that you've experienced in the past. So suicide has certainly, as I said, it's not dinner conversation every day, but it's something that we do talk about. Then a couple of years ago, I had another VIP to me share that the depression or the feelings that they were having were overwhelming. And it was conveyed in such a way that it felt a bit not casual, but it didn't feel imminent. And then as I was, getting around to getting them the support or finding a resource to support them, then things, sort of came up in a much bigger and imminent way. So even despite the things that I've read, the things that I've shared, and the experiences I've had, this experience also taught me that, I heard that, but it still didn't click for me that this was now, that the need was now. The support needed to come now. And I'm grateful that we were successful in getting the support that they needed and the help and the resources and all of those things. However, it took a really big event in order for me to stop being busy in other ways and going to get to it, to getting to it now. Get in the car and let's go kind of now. So as I said, I'm not an expert in suicide prevention. I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form. My intention in coming to do this today, it felt like the right time for me to, and I'm very forthcoming about my story. I'm not one not to talk about it, but I really felt compelled to again put it out there to people that we don't have to have the answers, but we do have to have our listening ears on. And when we were making assumptions about what somebody is telling us, that it's nothing, they'll get over it, they're just having a bad day, or all of those things where we want to diminish what they're feeling, and then we might use words or language to diminish what they've just shared with us. That's the big difference, the listening, so that they feel heard, that you are listening from a place of wanting to be of support, and not to diminish what it is that they are honestly and genuinely and authentically sharing with you. Because hearing that somebody feels bad, it's horrible, right? We don't want anybody to feel that way. We don't want anybody to go on that train. And so doing ourselves and them and everybody in the world to be open to hearing that, and allowing them to express what it is that they are thinking and feeling in a safe and non-judged place. It's certainly something that you can't just flip a switch and turn on, especially if it's somebody who's close to you, because you of course want to fix, we want to talk them out of it, we want to do this. But we also have to sometimes step back and understand and respect the fact that we may not be that person, right? We may not be that person that is going to have the right words, that we need to be that person to help them find the right people. And that's okay, because there are tremendous amounts of resources. So I'm so grateful for everybody who has jumped on here today. I appreciate that this is a topic that, especially on any day of the week or on the calendar, is not the lightest of topics. But it's also an opportunity for us to, talking about it doesn't normalize and make everything, making suicide and all of that okay. But it is also an opportunity for us to learn from each other. It's an opportunity to maybe approach things in a different way, to change our mindset, to change how we're thinking, and to maybe be more open to receiving, and be also okay, make it okay for how they are feeling, and okay for us to find the help that they need. I am so blessed by being able to have the opportunity to be sharing this, and I'm so grateful for you to be here. I will share the resources below this post if you are interested in reading the post that I referred to. And if you ever want to talk about grief or anything, always know that I'm happy to have a conversation. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.